Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. 2026. In case anyone's still wondering what year this is, we made it to the other side. And just happy to have everyone back here. We're going to get a slow start as usual, waiting for folks to join. I see the number of attendees growing as people connect. And we'll get started in a couple minutes. Looks like we've got some of our dedicated folks coming back. It's kind of cool. I recognize people's names, and I've met several of you in person throughout the last year. So I'm glad that everyone's still with us for another year of Land Development Academy. As usual, take a minute, grab a coffee, grab a drink, and remember that if you attended, what did we say? If you attended two or more sessions, I think it is, you can get a Land Development Academy mug. Just send me an email and we'll connect on how to get you that mug. So you can feel extra special when you're connecting with us doing that webinar or presentation. You can come with your mug. And good morning. If we haven't met yet, my name is Bianca Michuda, and I am a community engagement specialist for the Austin Development Services. Just really, again, want to thank you for joining us. I'm excited to welcome everyone back for the city's second year of Land Development Academy. So the Land Development Academy sessions offer a deeper look at the site plan review process from experts across City of Austin departments who work with site plans. And it looks like we have a good number of folks coming into the room with us today. And I want to ask you to help us track our attendance, because sometimes I know that people join with a group, so there's more than a single person viewing. And if that's the case for you today, go ahead and enter into the chat how many people are in your group participating with you today. So if you're a single viewer, no need to add that. We've got you counted, but if it's one person with a room full, let us know. And we'll go on to the next slide, please. Before we get started, I want to review the engagement format and let you know that we have an hour set aside for our program today. We're going to start with a presentation and we'll close with a question and answer session. So questions can be posted during the presentation by using the Q&A bank at the bottom of your screen. There's an icon that you can click on. Or you can ask your questions live during the Q&A portion by using the raised hand function, which is also at the bottom of your screen. And if you're having any issues with any of those functions, you can go ahead and chat one of the meeting hosts, and that'll help us. We can troubleshoot with you. But I want to let you know that while we hope to be able to answer all of your questions, there may be some that we don't have information for, or we just don't have the time to get to. And in those cases, we do send follow-up response for all of our questions. We send a summary of all the questions and answers. And we are recording the session as well. So everyone who's here today will get a link to the recording, the Q&A summary, and the slide deck. So hold tight, that'll be coming. And with that, I will go ahead and introduce Brian Golden, who is going to kick off the presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, Bianca. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking some time this morning to learn a little bit more about the transportation review process. So I wanted to start by giving a little bit of background as to who we are as the reviewers on the city side. So I'm part of a group called the Transportation Development Services Division. There are three program managers within that division, and we have divided up the city into three geographic areas. So if you submit your site plan, and you may get a different reviewer, a different program manager based on your geographic area. So those three areas, we have the north area, central, and south, correspond with council districts. So just to say, we are not actually the TDS division is not within DSD. We're actually within the Transportation and Public Works Department, but we work in close coordination with DSD in the review of site plans, but also subdivisions and zoning cases and other permit reviews as well. So I'll sort of take the high level 30,000 foot view here, and I think we need to talk a little bit about how we guide growth here in the city and the components that speak to that. So the overarching planning document for the city is Imagine Austin, and that's our city's comprehensive plan. It's a 30-year long range planning and goal oriented document that speaks to many different disciplines and priorities, some of which are transportation related. We also have the Austin Strategic Mobility Plan, the ASMP, which is you can think of it as a transportation focused comprehensive plan. So the ASMP stands with Imagine Austin. It is a separate document. It has been adopted by council. And similar to Imagine Austin, it's on a 20-year timeline. So this is to be updated every 20 years, but it is still a long-range, forward-looking document. And the ASMP really speaks to all aspects of transportation within the city. So all different types of modes, and modes meaning how you may get from one place to another. So pedestrian, public transit, biking. And we'll get into that more in a little bit. But the ASMP tells us what roads need to be built in the future, what bike facilities need to be built in order to achieve the goals that Imagine Austin has laid out. Finally, the other little unusual piece of this is our regulating plans. And you may be familiar with Chapter 25.2, which is the zoning ordinance, the zoning chapter of our land development code. The regulating plans are similar to 25.2, so they are council adopted plans. And the reason I bring them up here is because they have their own specific set of transportation priorities and design criteria. So we'll get into this more a little bit as well. First, though, I want to dive into the ASMP just a little bit more. As I mentioned, it does speak to all the different modal aspects of transportation here in the city. So we have public transit component, a bicycle system component, the urban trail system, pedestrian network, which would include all of the sidewalks, and then the roadway system, which is what most people think of when it comes to streets. Um, Drilling down a little bit more into the roadway system, and we're going to focus on that a little bit here. We have the street network map, and so what this map is, it has classified every street in the city, and we have a level designation for every type of street. So um, it's based on a level 1 through 5 classification. But we actually have a level 0, which would be alleys. But most of all of the development that you may be familiar with will be occurring on a level 1 plus street. So the let's see. So the way I like to think of these street level classifications is we have sort of you could think of it as a river's tributary system. So we have our level 1 streets, which are our local streets, and so that may be what single family homes are fronting. That may be what you think of as your neighborhood street, what your direct access. These are low capacity, low volume roads, and you can think of them as the tributaries of a creek. Those lead into level 2 roads, which you may also have heard referred to as collector street. A collector street is going to be more of your neighborhood oriented street. So it's what you may use to get in or out of your immediate neighborhood. And then you can think of that as a creek that flows into our level 3 streets, which are arterials. And those are going to be the major streets that you typically think of. So it may be, Lamar, Burnett, Stastny, William Cannon. Those type of streets are going to be our arterial level 3 streets. And then beyond that, we have level 4 and 5, and those are classifications for highway frontage roads, or the interstate would be a level 5. So just briefly, I want to touch on the roadway capacity plan. And so this is embedded within that street network table. So the roadway capacity plan is sort of well, it's literally a map of the projects that the city will implement in the future, either through capital improvement projects or through the development process. And this roadway capacity plan identifies new streets that need to be built, or widening, or upgrading maybe substandard streets, streets that may not have a curb and gutter, say, right now. So all in all, there's about 1,100 different projects included in the RCP, the Roadway Capacity Plan. These are divided up into 17 different service areas, and I'm not going to go into that, but what that means, that's referring to the street impact fee. There are different service areas associated with that. But just to say that it is dispersed. These projects are dispersed all over the city, and they're based on prioritization models, which include development patterns, growth trends, and different community criteria. So travel choice, how residents move along a corridor, how they need to get from point A to point B, commuter delay. So that may be how long somebody has to wait at a signal, uh, what you think of it as traffic, safety aspects. So we look at crash data, and we look at our Vision Zero policy, as well as access and connectivity. So what new areas are built that need to be connected to existing areas, or existing areas that need additional connections. So following up again with the regulating plans now. So these are, as I mentioned, council adopted. They are regulatory plans, meaning that if you have a site, if you have a development that falls within the boundaries of a regulating plan, then your site is subject to those rules and regulations. Right now, we have 5 different regulating plans. You may also hear them referred to as transit-oriented developments, TODs. And so what these plans were developed to guide some additional growth and density into areas that are well served by transit, and to orient development to capitalize on those transit connections. Briefly, I want to also mention, you may have also heard the term Great Streets for downtown and the University Neighborhood Overlay, the UNO district. These are not actually regulating plans. They're overlay districts, so they are really opt-in to a density bonus program. So if your site falls within either the downtown density bonus area or UNO, which is primarily West Campus, you can opt in for your development to have increased density or height. And subject to that, you'll be required to adhere to a certain a streetscape requirement, lighting, enhanced materials, wider sidewalks, but it's not regulatory in the sense that these TOD plans are. So what you see here on screen, this is just an excerpt from the East Riverside Corridor Regulating Plan. And hopefully you can see there are a couple streets highlighted there. Those are called out as future streets, just meaning that those are not built yet. So those will correspond with roads that you'll find in the roadway capacity plan that are planned, unbuilt, and will either be built through capital improvement projects by the city or through development as they come. One other note I just wanted to point out here for regulating plans, they all have their own unique and distinct set of design guidelines when it comes to transportation. And primarily that corresponds with what the streetscape looks like. So the sidewalk width, whether that sidewalk needs to be shaded with street trees or awnings, if there are bike facilities required. They are all fairly similar, but they do have they are uniquely tailored to each district. All right, so now we've talked about kind of the bigger background picture, what guides us in our growth, and now I want to talk about what that looks like at the more site level. And how we actually review and guide development themselves. So there's 2 primary components to this. The city's regulatory authority to review sites and site plans developments comes out of Title 25, which is the Land Development Code. Transportation specifically, most of our elements come out of 25.6, the transportation code. And what you will find under 25.6 would be right-of-way dedication requirements. If you have a large site, you may be required to submit a traffic impact analysis or provide some off-site mitigation. That comes from 25.6. Our former parking requirements and existing loading requirements also come out of this chapter, as well as the street impact fee as well, which is its own ordinance, but it is included in 25.6. So the Land Development Code tells us what needs to be built, essentially, what needs to happen. And then we have the other primary component, which is the Transportation Criteria Manual, the TCM. You may see that referred to quite a bit. The TCM essentially tells us how that needs to be built and what that needs to look like. So it is more a set of design construction standards for required improvements, required facilities. The TCM also tells us what our streets need to look like, what the back of curb needs to look like, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that in just a bit. But it also describes the TCM is a very large document. So not only does it include the street typology, so what those level 1 through level 5 streets should look like in terms of if you're looking at it as a cross section, how many lanes it might need, the type of sidewalk widths, if it needs trees and shading and landscape zones. But it also includes elements that are site specific. So the TCM tells us how wide a driveway should be, what a driveway needs to look like, what parking areas need to look like, how wide a bike lane needs to be on the street. So very large encompassing document, and we refer to it quite a bit in our review. So finally here, this is just a small excerpt from the TCM. And what you're seeing here is table 2.2. And this is just a snapshot of our level 2 through 4 roadways. There are also plenty of graphics in the TCM, which do a much better job of showing this if tables aren't your thing. But what you'll see in this table is that each level roadway has a set of specific standards for sidewalk widths, tree furniture zones, which would also be you may have heard that referred to as a planting zone. If a bike facility is required on that street along that frontage, this would tell you how the width of that bike facility, what type of bike facility, and then in the bottom there, you'll see that motor vehicle and transit zone. Mostly that's used for new street construction and more so in new subdivisions. If we are building new streets, or if a developer is building new streets, we will refer to this section, which tells us how wide those lanes need to be, and what type of travel lanes and what those need to look like. So I'm going to hand it off here to Danielle, who's going to go into a little more detail about the site-specific design.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, if you can go to the next slide, that would be great. Perfect. All right, so yeah, I'm going to talk more about what you can expect from us as transportation reviewers. I'm Danielle Morin. I manage the south area of that map, council districts 2, 3, 5, and 8. I don't know if Brian mentioned, but he's the central, and then we have Renee in the north. So yeah, our site plan review, we really get our authority from the Land Development Code. Chapter 25.6 is where we get that. Chapter 25.6 talks about our long-range transportation plan, which at the moment is the Austin Strategic Mobility Plan, or you'll probably hear me say ASMP pretty often. And then the design elements come from the TCM. Next slide, please. Perfect. So when you submit for a site plan, you will have to, one of the first things that you'll be asked to do is to fill out a TIA determination worksheet. This worksheet is typically filled out typically by an engineer. And what it will ask is the land use that you are proposing on your site, and then the associated number of trips that site will generate. This will tell us whether or not a specific analysis is required. And we have a couple different types. We have a neighborhood traffic analysis, and that's for sites that generate 300 daily trips or less. There are some caveats on the different types of zoning that's nearby. We also have a transportation demand management requirement, and that's for sites that generate anywhere between 2,000 and 5,000 trips. And then we also have a full transportation or traffic impact analysis for sites that generate 5,000 or more trips. And what these analyses give us, they give us kind of a glimpse of what the site will be generating. It allows us to impose restrictions if necessary. It could be, I'm trying to think of some examples. It could be access restrictions. So we could look at the site and say, we really only want access on a certain roadway, or we need you to reduce the number of driveways. It could be that we need additional pedestrian or bicycle connections in the area. And these analyses let us study that, and then they also allow us to require that during our review. Next slide, please. And so right-of-way dedication is really important. It's fairly often that we will get site plans submitted and the site has been designed and not considered the right-of-way that is required to be dedicated. This can cause significant delay and it can require the site to be redesigned. So one of your first steps, as if you are someone submitting a site plan, is to look up the ASMP, look up the roadways that are adjacent to your site. You can pull out, so this one is Middle Fiscal Road. You can see the street level classification. You can see the existing right-of-way, and you can see what type of right-of-way will be required. And that's typically from the existing center line of the roadway into your site. So you can take that number. So let's say 80 feet is required. You can look at the existing center line, measure 40 feet, and you can assume that that's what will be required of your site to dedicate. So that allows you to decide, where your buildings will be placed, where you're going to put your sidewalks, where the curb will be located. So it gives you a heads up on what you can expect from us as reviewers. And it allows you to design your site so that you don't have to, redesign at U1 or U2. Next slide, please. So Brian mentioned, I think, that we no longer have on-site parking requirements. That allows each site to be pretty flexible and design parking based on their use and what they think that their site will generate and what they will need. This can be helpful as a cost saving measure, especially affordable housing units or smart housing. But we do, as reviewers, I think there's a misconception is that sometimes we just review parking on the street, but we do actually review on-site parking. So if you are submitting something with a parking lot or a parking garage, it is something that we will review and you'll get comments from us on. And some of the things that we do look at, the depth of the stall, the width, the angles, things like that. You'll get comments from us, and we'll give a general look to make sure that the site flows safely. Next slide, please. And then based on those parking requirements, we do require bike parking, which is divvied up into two different types. So there's short-term bike parking and long-term bike parking. And you can find those requirements on our website. Short-term parking is something that's convenient more towards somebody walking by a site, somebody wanting to park and secure their bicycle, walk into a store, probably not leave it super long. Long-term bike parking, you can think of it more as maybe an employee that works at a store or somebody visiting a friend in a multifamily complex. And the long-term bike parking, we look to make sure that there is room for the bike parking. We make sure that it's secure and covered. A lot of times, multifamily or office buildings will have a secure bike storage room, which has become popular as of late. So those are things that you can expect from us as reviewers. Next slide, please. Pedestrian parking paths are new to this iteration of the TCM, which has been out for a couple years now. This provides, so if you think of, you go to a store and you park your car, it allows you a safe place to walk into the store instead of, going behind your car and walking through the drive aisle. It gives you a place either to push your cart, walk, maybe a baby stroller, but it provides a safe pedestrian option to get into the store. So that is required on 50% of, or for 50% of parking spaces now. The materials that we look at, if it's not required to be an ADA route, then you can get a little creative. A lot of times there are impervious cover restrictions that we're working with, or aesthetic considerations that we want to look at. So it could be crushed granite. It could be a variety of materials, and we've seen developers do a couple different iterations of that. But it is required, so just be aware of that when you were designing your parking layout. I think it is pretty common that we get parking lot designs submitted that don't take this into consideration. So this planning for this before you submit could save definitely a lot of time. Next slide. And then our loading requirements are still triggered by 25.6. You can look at the old Appendix A to look at what types of loading spaces are required. This is an example of a site plan that's showing the required 12 foot by 20 or 12 foot by 45 foot loading space. So just make sure that when you're designing a site, you have a loading space that is properly dimensioned. You've outlined it, clearly on the site plan, either by something like this or in the legend, and make sure that it works. I think a lot of times, especially now, loading spaces are used by Amazon delivery trucks or, Uber Eats type of thing. We'll use those loading spaces. So they are important. It's important that the user knows where they are. So proper signage is important. And just make sure that they work and flow with the site properly. And then, we do not allow loading or unloading in the public right of way. So make sure that you've accommodated that on your site. And that also goes for trash. Trash is something that we as transportation reviewers also look at. We do see a lot of smaller or infill sites that don't account for trash or how a trash truck will come and collect the trash on their site. So make sure that you think about that and think about how a trash truck would maneuver and not conflict with pedestrians or cars. Next slide, please. So when you get comments from us as reviewers, you will be required to provide space and design elements related to the ASMP and TCM cross sections. Those will include sidewalks. Sometimes there's a buffer, bicycle facility, and tree and furniture zone. Sometimes the bike and tree furniture zone will flip depending on the situation, where you are in the city, what level roadway you are. So be careful to note that when you are designing your site. One thing I'll note that you may or may not notice is that the new TCM does show bike lanes now, which are the same elevation as sidewalks. So they are raised from the roadway instead of being just painted in the roadway. So that's something to consider when looking at where you design your curb on your site. And this is applicable to all new developments. So this is something that you will definitely get a comment from us, and make sure that you account for that in your design. Next slide. In subchapter E, Brian, I don't think Brian mentioned that. This is an older code. It does still apply. It gets triggered by your use and or the size of your development. What is and is not required also depends on where you're located, whether you're on a core transit corridor, an urban roadway, or a suburban roadway. And comments that you can expect from us for transportation could include internal circulation routes. We call those IRs. if you have a large enough site, that's us making sure that your site, it's almost like you break it up into different blocks and we make sure that pedestrians and cars can get through it properly. We look at parking and loading, underground utilities, and connectivity to other sites. And clear zone and sidewalk and planting zone, that will coordinate with the TCM cross section. So you can look at both documents. And if you have questions about which one applies, we're always here to answer those questions. Next slide, please. Driveways are another thing that we look at as transportation reviewers. The updated TCM does have new driveway design criteria, which it seems that most applicants are aware of and taking into consideration. We have made it so that driveways in general are tighter. So the width of driveways has decreased, and that's in order to allow more safer crossings for pedestrians and bicycles. We also, the curb return radii has become tighter, and we did work with Austin Fire to make these design considerations. So as an applicant, I would not assume that everything needs to be this really wide driveway. So take a look at the TCM and the driveway requirements based on your level of roadway before designing it. We will look at driveway spacing. So how far away are you from an adjacent driveway or driveway across the street? We will look at throat width. So that's the width of the driveway. We will also look at throat length. And that throat length is determined on how much parking you are providing. And that's in order to allow for safe queuing. So if you have an event or a situation where cars are waiting to exit the site, that you have enough storage room to not cause issues on the adjacent roadway. And then lastly, we do look at alley access. So if you do have a driveway proposing to take access from an alley, you can expect some comments from us on that. Next slide, please. And that's pretty much all we've got. Happy to answer questions from people online and or at a later date.
Thank you. Thank you both, Danielle and Brian. I just want to take a moment to remind everyone, now that we're in the Q&A portion, how we're going to work that. So if you do have a question that you would like to submit in the written format, please look for the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. There's an icon. It's like a speech bubble with a question mark, and it says Q&A, and that's where you can insert your question. So it is different from the chat. So please make sure you get that in there, or if you find it easier, you can use the raise hand function, which is also at the bottom of your screen. And I can call on you and you can just verbally ask your question. So I'll go ahead and toggle between those two formats. So far, I don't see any hands up and I don't see any questions in the Q&A box, but I'll give it a little bit of time and see if anything comes through. Let's see. All right. I just got a question from Miss Keisha Lara. Hey, Keisha. When corrections are required, is this request placed on the master comment report?
Yeah, so typically if there is a situation where a site is being designed and that we know that a correction will be required in the future in order to comply with code or criteria, yeah, then we would make a comment in the master comment report. There typically will also be some sort of site plan note on there so that the inspectors know that at some point the site needs to go back in for a correction before it can be finalized and before a final CO can be issued.
Next question comes from Stephen. How are the reviewers reconciling a required 25-foot curb radii per fire code versus a maximum 20-foot curb radii in the TCM. Am I saying radii correctly? Is that how we say it? I don't know.
Yes, it is. So AFD has actually signed off on the TCM. So and the TCM also accounts for what fire code requires. So in believe it's table 7, the driveways. Um, you'll see that if a driveway is required to be a fire lane, there are accommodations for that. But otherwise, it is a 20-foot curb radii maximum.
See, our attendees are up with the code. They called out that conflict, so cool. Another question from Keisha. Is there a deadline or time frame that the customer has to return the corrections?
I think that would probably depend on the situation and how long of a project it is. If it's something like, a final driveway design needs to be redone before a final CO can be issued, and then in that situation, it's probably at the very end, right? So I think it depends on what we're talking about, and what you need it for your CO. So I think that's kind of an open-ended question.
Okay. Yeah. Another question. Oh, wow, we've got them coming in. Thank you all. Let's see. For subchapter E in current day, do you always go to the TCM for new sidewalk zone and street tree zone widths? Or is there ever a situation where you'd use the subchapter E sidewalk or street tree zone dimensions over the TCM? Which one takes precedence or when?
Sure. So yes, today we use the TCM for all of those elements. Subchapter E is they don't cancel each other out. The TCM encompasses what subchapter E required. It may be a little bit more or less, but than what subchapter E would have required. But generally, it is in keeping with the subchapter E requirement. So they really shouldn't be in conflict with one another. So we do refer to TCM though.
Yeah. Another question here. Is there coordination as transportation reviewers with the city's building or zoning departments?
Yeah, we meet with the zoning department weekly, and we talk about all of the zoning cases that come in. We as transportation reviewers also review. So before those final comments are sent out to applicants, yes, we do coordinate with the zoning department.
In general, do changes to the transportation criteria manual apply when they are adopted, or are current site plan applications, quote unquote, grandfathered under previous TCM requirements?
Yeah, so we review site plans under the date, the rules and regulations that were in place upon the date of submittal of that site plan. So in rare cases, there are exceptions, health and public safety being some of those exceptions. But for the most case, yes, we will review all codes and ordinances at the date of submittal.
Right, another question. Wow, we've got a really lively Q&A. This is great. And we do have plenty of time, so this is really awesome scenario. Okay. This question is from Anil. Does Great Streets have its own separate review process? And is that approval issued as part of Transportation and Public Works review or approval?
Yes, Great Streets does have its own separate review process. Urban design within the planning department takes lead on review of Great Streets. We do work in coordination with urban design to make sure the Great Streets elements aren't in conflict with TCM. Mostly we're looking at the intersection geometry, but right now urban design does review the Great Streets elements.
Yes, we've got so many questions and y'all have all the answers too. This is awesome. See, next. When a TCM waiver may be required, can we discuss with staff without going through a formal process?
Yeah, that's a good question, Candace. So we have the option for, we can do a couple things. You can go through a development assessment, which is an assessment that's done just through transportation. That allows an applicant to kind of give us a scenario, a site plan. It doesn't have to be fully designed at that point. But it allows you as an applicant to come with answers. And then we make sure that we have transportation staff in that meeting to answer questions. And typically those answers will be binding for a certain amount of time. So that's a great way to get feedback from us. Sometimes if you have, a quick question, you're always welcome to send us an email. I do warn in that, unless you're going through a formal assessment, an answer from us may or may not be binding. So if it's just like a concept, we're happy to go through that. But I don't want to give you an answer, verbally or through email, and then you assume that a year down the line. So that's when a formal assessment would be something that we would suggest.
You? Any other questions or comments anyone would like to make? That's taking us to the end of our written questions, and I didn't see any hands go up. Okay, I've got another question here now. Are there public involvement for any site developments?
I think that would depend on the type of development. So most developments will be probably under what's considered by right development. So that means it goes through a purely administrative process. So there isn't really public involvement with those. Sometimes though, there will be sites that have a conditional use, and when that happens, a conditional use needs to go to a board and commission hearing. So there is an opportunity for public involvement in that process. Apart from site plan, the public can always get involved with the zoning application process, and public comments are always welcome during those hearings.
I see a hand up, and this is from Carl that just asked that question. Go ahead, Carl. I'm let your mic on, I think.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, just as I guess as a follow-up to what Brian said, I guess I can take my hand down. So I've studied in one of my masters on sometimes there's town developments and beautification programs, and then you have funding assistance by maybe some private entities. And so so this is my first time attending one of your meetings. I'm here in the Bryan College Station of Texas. So I'm at least an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from Austin. But I was just wondering if, as site development reviewers or transportation reviewers, if during your process, if there's private citizens or that would like to assist in the the beautification process or the design process or the development decisions to enhance particular blocks or you know unused space that's now can be considered as usable space. So that was my follow-up comment. Thanks.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I can't think of too many opportunities that when it comes to by right development, so that administrative review process. Um, but certainly there are other avenues. Usually we've seen constituents go through their council member or get involved in a community neighborhood association, and we are always happy to take comments and meetings with the neighborhood. But specifically for a site plan review process, that that avenue just isn't available.
I have a couple more minutes if anyone has a last burning question. But if not, I will go ahead and let y'all know that we still have plenty of sessions lined up if you'd like to return or if you know somebody who missed today's session. So visit the Land Development Academy webpage. You can see our past sessions materials. Materials from today will be posted there. And then again, you can register for the future classes that are coming up. Our next class is going to be in a couple of weeks. It's going to be the follow-up to today's session. It's Transportation 102, talking a little bit more about how to get ready for a transportation review. And I do see some questions coming up in our box, so let me get to those. Another question here from Alexia. Is there any further research or investigation into a street during the traffic impact analysis, or is the amount of vehicles only the only determining factor? They're curious about a street classified as a two-way, but it's actually an alley, and how did that pass the TIA steps, ...
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. Yes, there's lots of information that goes into the TIA. So certainly existing vehicle counts are one of those. But we also look at background traffic growth. We look at how different intersections within a certain vicinity function. We look at other developments that we're expecting to come online and how that might impact the area traffic. Let's see, and we also look at multimodal aspects. So are there bike facilities adjacent? Are there transit facilities? What does the pedestrian network look like here? And we look at those through what's called the transportation demand management review. So not to get too technical, but yes, so there are many different aspects that go into a TIA review, other than just the purely vehicle counts. There is maybe I can get to the second part of the question there. So a TIA is triggered by a certain threshold of trips. And so now I believe it's 5,000 daily vehicle trips is what triggers the TIA. So if a development came in under that number, maybe this was the case here, then a TIA would not have been required, and it may have been permitted as purely, under by right development under that zoning.
Yeah. Question. Good one at that. Thank you also to Alexia. Any other questions? We've got about 5 minutes left. Thank you all again for being here. I apologize that somehow I overlooked putting this session in the drop down of our survey. But please know that save that URL, hop back on to take the survey maybe later today or tomorrow. And we do want to hear how you felt about today's experience. And I'll also send that link out when I send the materials to all the attendees. So just as like a reminder to get you to take that survey. So I think we'll be wrapping up. And thanks again. We'll see you for the second class of the year in a couple of weeks with Transportation 102. I don't know if Brian and Danielle, do you have any closing words for us?
No, good questions.
Yeah, those are all good questions. And like I mentioned, we're always available if you need to ask a quick question, shoot us an email. We are busy, but we do try and respond as quickly as we can. Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Wonderful presentation. Thanks for the participation, y'all. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.